Hi, this is Robert. It's September 2020. We're through the summer of the pandemic, and hopefully things are looking sunnier. They are today. The fog's burned off. It's a Sunday morning, and I'm relaxing on the couch here. And wanted to talk to you about classic rock albums because I felt I'd done a disservice to the genre last time by choosing only 10. I admit I did cheat and add like 10 more alternates, but I'd. You can never choose just 10 classic rock albums. There's so many good ones. And I felt a little remiss in doing that, so I wanted to do a follow up where I do 10 or what's actually going to be 20 more classic rock albums. And one thing you heard from me is that I was a little sick of of country rock in the 70s. Uh, it got to be the go to safe programming mainstay of the classic rock stations. And they would play the Eagles to death. And I mean, in Florida, they would literally, it seemed like they played the Eagles hourly. And of course, with that kind of saturation, you quickly, anyone with half an intellect would get pretty sick of it. So, having said that, I'm starting out with a guy who played in the Eagles. This is I forget what label they're calling this, but this is a hi fi label. I think it says Audio Fidelity, but it's a gold audiophile disc, and I believe they use tubes in the mastering. Uh, But this is an album by Joe Walsh. It's a solo album he did in the early 70s. It's called So What? And it's most famous for having his song, Life's Been Good. Yeah. Uh, and which is a wonderful song. It shows his quirky sense of humor, which comes through a lot in his music. And as you can see by the album cover, looking so serious while underwater with his French cafe table there. But this album, what drew me in, he has a very high energy song on this called At the Station. And in the 70s, I was starved for high energy songs because that's kind of what I was into, which is why I loved punk when it came out. Jumped on punk and new wave, but in the early 70s, you really, the high energy songs were few and far between. You had the glam bands and a few occasional gems by guys like Joe. Joe later joined the Eagles, which I considered selling out. I thought he was always better on his own. But this is a neat album. I mean, it does have its moments of country rock, but I've grown to like him mainly because he's such an inventive and talented musician that you don't feel like you're hearing the same old thing over and over again. So this says Life's Been Good at the Station, but they're also the country-ish songs Over and Over. Uh, what's the one? Indian Summer, another great song. God, I keep saying great. Promise I wouldn't do that this time. So, anyway, excellent album. Blind Faith. This is another Eric Clapton super group that he played in the 70s. These were, this I believe was, I think it was after Layla. God, I don't know if we get an original date on this anywhere, but anyway, it's Eric and Ginger Baker from Cream, but you also have Stevie Winwood from Traffic singing in this. So, and yeah, The most famous song on this is a mellow ballad, acoustic ballad called Can't Find My Way Home, which I'm sure you've heard. Uh, the nice thing, this is a remastered edition, and they did a wonderful job about correcting that shrill microphone that Stevie was using for that album cut. But this album is in the same vein as Layla. It's kind of bluesy rock. I think it's more mainstream rock than bluesy, but it's just got some wonderful playing. And of course, Ginger Baker on drums is always good. So, can highly recommend. Let's see. And the Allman Brothers. Talking about bluesy rock, here you go. These guys transitioned. They started out as a remarkably talented and inventive, blues band, and came up with this wonderful invention, the blues in three-quarter time, which gives the blues this wonderful movement, and the songs just flow along. And there are two on their first album, uh, Dreams and Whipping Post. And of course, you've heard Whipping Post. It's one of the great classic rock songs. This is a neat CD, Capricorn Classics, but it's the first two Allman Brothers albums, the ones that Dwayne played on before he died. And it's the ones that are their bluesiest. After Dwayne left, they kind of gravitated more into the country rock mold because that's where the money was. So you have the first album with a lot of excellent blues songs on it. Trouble No More, Black Hearted Woman, Not My Cross to Bear, so many. And the second disc is starting to get a little more countrified. You've got Revival and, of course, Midnight Rider, which you've heard. Yeah, but they're very good albums in their own right, and it's great to have them on one disc. And speaking of the blues, I think the one of the greatest bluesmen to ever live, certainly one of the greatest blues guitarists to ever live, was Stevie Ray Vaughan, gone way too soon. Uh, Started out extremely strong with this album Texas Flood. This has Pride and Joy and Texas Flood, Love Struck Baby, just a slew of strong songs, beautifully played. The guy was incredibly masterful. I got to see him live twice back in Houston, and he could play the albums lick for lick. I mean, it wasn't like he was, he never held back. It was always, he did a top notch effort. Sadly, he had a battle with drugs in his later career, and just as he'd gotten sober and released another great album, In Step, he died in a helicopter accident. But this is a mobile fidelity disc of his first Texas Flood album, and it's wonderful. Okay, this is another one of these gold discs. This one says DCC on it, but this is a high fidelity disc of the first Van Halen album. And these guys just burst out of the gate and were huge. One summer back in, God, was it 74, 73 or 4, I think. And this has Running with the Devil. Their cover Really Got Me. It's got the classic Eddie Van Halen solo Eruption on it. Just a wonderfully strong debut album from a talented band. And I'm sure you've seen this album cover before. Wondered what the hell's that about? This is In the Court of the Crimson King by the band King Crimson. And this is a reissue of that was done. They remastered the album and it was remixed by, what's his name? Steve. Oh, he's not on the album cover. Anyway, this has a Blu-ray audio disc in it, so you've got a lot of all the outtakes from the studio and so on. But this is a wonderful progressive rock album. It has the stately anthem "Court of the Crimson King" on it, but also you've got. It starts out with a really hard-edged rocker, 20th century schizoid man, and 21st century schizoid man, pardon me. And but there are a lot of neat little mellow songs with mellotrons and other things playing. Just a beautiful early 70s progressive rock album. And I did it a service last time by leaving out glam rock. So here's David Bowie, The Rise and Fall of Ziggy Stardust and the Spiders from Mars. And loved glam in the 70s because it had some energy to it. Some of the songs were a little too quirky, maybe a little too British music hall for me, but this is a great album. Has the classic rocker Suffragette City on it, but many other excellent songs. And you can never go wrong with Bowie. Okay, Boston. This is a CBS remaster. This is a high fidelity CD series they did, the Master Sound series, where they did them on gold discs, and they also used the technique called super bit mapping, which kind of shifts the bits up and down to where you supposedly get more resolution than you do with a standard CD. But this is the first Boston album. Boston was the creation of lead guitarist and all-round genius Tom Schatz. He came up with a lot of electronic devices, including a hi-fi phono circuits. I had a preamp that had a circuit by him in it. But he's most famous for being the lead guitarist of Boston. And he came up with a box that made his one guitar sound like 20. And that became the classic Boston sound. Anyway, this is their first album. It's got More Than a Feeling on it. Peace of Mind, Rock and Roll Band. Just, you've heard almost all the songs from this on the radio. It's a very strong debut from an excellent band. And Harry Nilsson Smilson, is a solo album by a guy who kind of sat in on a lot of his friends' albums, done a lot of backing vocals and things, and this is his solo effort. This is most famous for his cover of Badfinger's Without You, which is a very strong ballad. But what I always loved about it was the hard rocker on this, Jump Into the Fire, which, if you've heard it, you know it's awesome. And but this was one of those albums we just grabbed in the 70s in the desert of the country rock era. And speaking of country rock, Creedence Clearwater Revival. I couldn't find my copy of Pendulum, so this greatest hits is going to have to substitute. I have to quit loaning discs to people. I never get them back. But anyway, this has Proud Mary, Bad Moon Rising, so many, Down in the Corner, Fortunate Son. My favorite is Have You Ever Seen the Rain? And of course, you have Hey Tonight on here too. But they're country rock, but these guys are so talented. They keep it from being boring. And classic blues rockers, ZZ Top, three boys from Texas. And this is, you're going, oh, it's another greatest hits album, but this is one they did early in their career. It's a reprisal of like their first four albums, and it's prior to Eliminator. Uh, I kind of like this disc because it's got the sonics of the original recordings. It hasn't been remastered, and you can actually hear the studio in some of these. But this one has Lagrange on it. My favorite are the dual songs, "Waiting for the Bus" and "Jesus Just Left Chicago." Great music, awesome blues songs. Great band, worth checking out. Okay, I think that's our top 10 at least. And we're on to the runners up. And Heart definitely should be in this list. This is the first band I heard where girls actually rocked, and they do a great job here. This has a Magic Man and Crazy on You on it. And I first heard this in a hi-fi shop. It was being used as a demo disc, and I went, "Wow, they're pretty awesome." Usually back then, if you're girls singing, you figure it's going to be bubblegum pop, but these girls rock, and this is a great, strong rock album, well worth getting. And speaking of girls rocking, this album is one I am reluctant to include just because it's been played to death, but it is a classic of the era. Fleetwood Mac Rumors. This has Go Your Own Way on it. This is the later Fleetwood Mac after the initial incarnation was a blues band with Peter Green. After he kind of self-destructed, they reformed and brought in the Wives and went a mellower route. Kind of, it's not quite country rock, but it's not quite folk rock, but it's very much mainstream. All the songs are very solid and approachable, and it's worth getting for that. But it was also in the 70s and 80s. This was like a go-to stereo demonstration record. This is a remastered version from the teens, I believe. Okay, let's get back into the meat and potatoes. Uh, I keep disparaging country rock, yet this guy came from that background and kind of disappeared back into it, I think. But for a brief moment, Stephen Stills did a solo album in 1970, and this is it. And he had a lot of friends play on this. He had a bunch of strong songs, which he had come up with, and he had friends like Jimi Hendrix and Eric Clapton play on it. Um, and it just showcases what a major talent he was. I mean, he definitely transcends the country rock medium. This album's more mainstream rock. It actually has some blues-based numbers. Most folks, if they know this album, they like Black Queen, which is it's a live cut of him, just Steven singing and playing guitar. And that sounds like it might be kind of boring, but you haven't heard Steven Stills play guitar. I mean, he can make one guitar sound like two, and just an amazingly entertaining piece. But this has a lot of uh, ranges from ballads to rock anthems. I mean, "We Are Not Helpless" is a rock anthem, in my opinion. But can't recommend this highly enough. There are no weak songs on this album. Mott the Hoople, again, let's go back to Glam. Ian Hunter and what I think were the most talented musicians of the Glam era. so talented that David Bowie kidnapped their original lead guitarist, Mick Ronson, play with him. But this is I think, their best album. The album before this was the one that David Bowie produced. It had all the young dudes on it and it broke them out into fame and fortune. And this is an album where they kind of talk about dealing with fame and fortune. But all the songs are strong. All the playing is good on it. This has All the Way from Memphis, which is a great upscale rocker, and then Drivin' Sister is just awesome upscale, hard driving rocker. Uh, but this also has some amazing ballads on it. Hymn for the Dudes and the Ballad of Mott the Hoople, which has the classic line from it. Rock and roll's a loser's game. It mesmerizes. I can't explain the reasons for the sights and for the sounds. Just and again, it's the price of fame. It's the theme of the album. But there's just some great playing on this. And here we go again. I couldn't find my copy of Steely Dan's Can't Buy a Thrill, which has a lot of their, I think their strongest melodies are most approachable stuff. They kind of get a little cryptic, quirky, inaccessible later on. But Reelin' in the Ear is just a wonderful, energetic rocker. And Steely Dan is a very talented band, very inventive, very playful. But Can't Buy a Thrill. This is a greatest hits, but it's got some of the songs from Can't Buy a Thrill on it. And I did Jethro Tull's Aqualung last time, but I wanted to do this one as well. This is Thick as a Brick, which is considered their magnum opus. It is a concept album where basically it came out originally on LP, and each side of the LP was one long 25 minute jam. But very structured, very organized. They knew exactly what they were doing. I mean, they do, they'd bring up a theme, there'd be a vocal bit, then they'd go into an instrumental bit, reprise the vocal bit, go on into something else, and just while but it all flows together quite well and ties up neatly at the end. It's just an amazingly powerful bit of music. But I actually wore out at least 2 LPs of this. Is it's also one of the few albums that actually had dynamic range. It would start out quiet, and then with Ian Anderson on guitar and the flute in the background, and then the electric guitars would just kick in, and it would rock hard. So this Tull is famous for their blend of English folk, classical music, jazz, and metal almost into something unique to them. And you either love them or hate them. I love them. So, and again, couldn't find my copy of The Grand Illusion. Somebody, God, I got to find who I gave them to, loaned them to. But anyway, The Grand Illusion had Come Sail Away, just a bunch of anthemic songs that came out on that one album. Very strong. Has a green cover, I remember that. This is a greatest hits album. It has this stand in for that one. And these guys are going to be a bit controversial. I don't know if you can call them rock. I mean, there is a rocker on here. Hazy Shade of Winter, it rocks. I mean, there's electric guitar in it and all that. But most of this album is just mellow folk rock. but there are a lot of really strong tunes. It says Mrs. Robinson on it, Bookends, America, Faking It, At the Zoo, a lot of neat songs. But this is again a mobile fidelity recording, and it has never sounded better than this. Really, it's amazing to think this came out in when 1968, and it sounds that good. Okay, so The Who, uh, they did so many excellent albums. I love Pete Townshend's songwriting. He takes classical forms yet rocks them up without having them sound dated at all. He's an excellent guitarist. He brought synthesizers almost into the mainstream single handedly with all the synth on Who's Next. This is the album, pardon me, that they did after Who's Next. So this is about 72, I think. But this is Quadrophenia. It originally came out as a double album with two LPs. And it's kind of a concept album. They tell the story of Jim, who's a mod, who's a young guy who used to ride scooters around in the early 60s. And they listen to the beat bands as opposed to the rockers who all rode motorcycles. And anyway, there's a whole backstory behind this, but this tells about the Who. The Who were part of the mod scene, and this is kind of a nostalgic album for Pete Townshend, but it tells Jimmy's story, and there's so many strong songs. There are so many excellent instrumental jams on this as well, because they had just a lot of time to do inventive things. But oh boy, I Am the Sea, The Real Me, The Punk and the Godfather, I'm the One, let's see, Is It in My Head, The 515, Bellboy, Dr. Jimmy, and of course, Love Reign O'er Me. Just, you know, can't recommend this enough. This is a interesting disc. This is a Blu-ray audio disc, so it's a very high resolution. This will play on almost any Blu-ray player and sound awesome doing it. This is another Blu-ray disc. I wanted to include Genesis because they were one of the great prog rock bands. They never got the fame and fortune that Pink Floyd or Emerson, Lake or Palmer or Yes did, but they were quite inventive. And I'll admit right out front, I am a Genesis snob. I only like the Peter Gabriel Genesis, not terribly fond of the Phil Collins Genesis, which I thought they kind of swung into the mainstream with Phil singing. But this is an early work of theirs. It's called Selling England by the Pound. And that's a line from the first song on the album called Dancing with the Moonlit Night, which is worth the price of the album on its own. Just wonderfully inventive, creative song, and just shows the band what great instrumentalists the band were, what great songwriters they were, and so on. But all the songs have just great jams in them. And speaking of Phil Collins, he actually does the vocals on a ballad on this called More Fool Me. And it's quite good. It doesn't sound like the Phil Collins we know and some of us love, but a great album. And I think that will do it. I've probably bored you enough, but hopefully that gives you some suggestions for classic rock albums you may not have known about or heard of before. But I appreciate you for sitting through all this. Thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe if you like this kind of content. Anyway, have a great day. This is Robert signing off.